Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How about you?
I am great. What did you want to come in for?
I wanted you to come here so I could introduce you to my fellow viewers.
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. Anyways, what questions do you have waiting for me?
How did you travel here to America?
Back in the 1970s, it was very difficult and expensive to come to America. But we did it with all my family's support, and we put money together and made it through the border and desert. It was also a very unique experience that we don't wish anyone to go through what we went through. We finally made it after 3 difficult days.
What was the first thing that came to mind when you came to America?
The first thing we did was to find a job and an apartment to live in. We both had to find 2 jobs that paid well to support our rent, groceries, and other expenses. Our salaries were very low, and it took many years for us to save up.
How did you communicate with people in Mexico and America?
We had to write letters from the moment you drop it from the mailbox, and it takes 8 business days in order for them to arrive in Mexico. And that was the way to stay connected with the family. The most important thing was that our kids, our parents, we were so old that we needed to send in money in order for them to eat every day.
Did you miss your kids?
Yes, we did. And for them, we worked so hard to bring them into America. It took 10 years to save up and have enough money for my 4 kids to come and live with us.
Did your kids like to live in America?
Yes and no. The school in America was very difficult for them to start. They couldn't understand the language, which was very frustrating for them. And also the weather was very severe with the snow. It took them 3 years to get used to it, and they were still complaining about moving back to Mexico.
What can you share with us that was fun back in the 70s?
We had very few options of watching TV back in the day. There was only 7 channels, and all we had was 2 news channels, 2 wrestling channels for women and men, and 3 shows for entertainment. There was no other language channels other than English, so we were forced to learn English. And besides TV, we only had parks. Kids liked to play volleyball, basketball, and ride their bikes, and also we used to go to the pool in the summer and the beach.
How much did it cost to buy groceries and pay rent in the 70s?
The rent in New York was $108 a month. It was paid by 3 people, us and another friend, who helped us with rent and groceries. That was the only way to afford it. For example, milk was about $1. We could get bread for 25 cents. You could get a decent amount of groceries for about $15 every week.
When did you buy your first house?
We moved from New York to Chicago in 1980, and that's when we bought our first building. It took us 10 years to save up, and we finally bought it and paid $75,000 for it. To this day, we still own this property with a value, and we can say it is good equity.
What else did you do after getting your first building?
We saved more money, and after 5 years, we created our own business. We used to own a second store furniture, and from that day, we didn't have to work for anyone. We were able to afford our business and buy anything we wanted from our own business. And then we bought our second building, which we paid $175,000. We used to save rent tenant, and also make money from there. And we finally saved up easily. And with the time my kids grew up, they started to get their own jobs, and we saved more money to our own.
Did you ever have difficulties in your life?
Yes, they had very hard times after my grandpa's accident. One day at the business, someone came to rob my grandpa and beat him up to death. The family thought that my grandpa wouldn't make it alive. The ambulance came early in the morning to pick my grandpa to the emergency room, which he got into a coma. We found out how big the trauma was on my grandpa's head. We received very bad news from the doctor. There was no date or time for my grandpa to ever wake up again. His coma took literally 6 months for us to see him awake again. The doctors couldn't believe that he finally opened his eyes again. But the sad part is when he looked around to the entire family, he did not recognize everyone. not even his own wife or his own mom. That was when we felt so depressed. Not just that, he also got amputated his thumb from the right hand, and it was not the same thing again. We had we had to look for a better place for him. My grandparents ended up selling their business, their building, etc., in order to pay the big hospital bill and to move out of state for a warm temperature. So they decided to move to Houston, Texas. When they actually moved there, and it was very difficult for them to start all over again. Now my grandma and grandpa never ever work again. They both got retired for a better life. Hello, Fiora, and welcome to History Smashers featuring you.
Hello, and what am I going to be doing tonight?
You are going to be asked questions about you.
Well, then let's get right into the show.
So where did you immigrate from?
I immigrated from Italy, more specifically Cosenza, with my beautiful wife Rose in 1940.
Wow, what a coincidence. I took a trip there and I think it was the best trip ever. Speaking of Italy, what was your favorite food there?
I think mine was gelato.
That sounds good, but what is that?
You would like it. It is ice cream but uses less cream and more milk than ice cream.
I love ice cream, but I don't think I would like that though. Anyway, speaking of food, what were some adventures back in the 40s?
So there were microwave ovens, color TVs, the Slinky, atomic bombs, which are kind of scary, and the Jeep.
Wow, all of those were made so many years ago. Oh, I almost forgot. What are some adventures from your country?
From my country, a lot of stuff, like the radio, the telephone, the eyeglasses, and the barometer.
Those are made from Italy. That's crazy. Well, anyways, what was going on in the 40s?
In 1940, however, after Germany began its invasions of France, Italy officially joined the war in the hopes of acquiring territories from its European rivals. In late 1940, Mussolini launched invasions of Egypt, Greece, and the French Alps that were easily rebuffed by Allied forces. I know, a lot, right?
Of course, that was really interesting. But what was going on in the U.S. in 1940?
The 1940s were defined by World War II, the Holocaust, atomic bombs, and the beginning of the Cold War. Women were needed in the workforce to replace men who went to war, and wartime production pulled the U.S. out of the Great Depression. Yay!
Dang, that was a lot of stuff to comprehend, but it was interesting. So who was the president or ruler in Italy in 1940?
Mussolini.
That's cool, but who was the president in the U.S. in 1940?
Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Wow, he was the president in 1940? Well, if you are not watching TV, what could you do in your free time for fun?
Well, you could go to sporting events, listen to the radio, go to dances or parties.
That's a lot of fun stuff to do in your free time. I wish I could just go and do that. Speaking of free time, what were some popular movies in the 40s?
Well, there were a lot, but the most popular ones were probably The Big Steal, The Concentration Camps, Jigsaw, and Too Late for Tears. The Big Steal was filmed in Los Angeles and Tehuacan, Mexico. It was also filmed in 1949. The cast was Robert Mitchum, Jane Greer, William Bendit, Patrick Knowles, Ramon Navarro, Lone Alvarado, John Whalen, and Pascal Garcia Pena. Jigsaw was a movie filmed in 1949 and in Toronto. The plot follows a group of people who find themselves forced to participate in a series of deadly games inside a barn. And finally, Too Late for Tears is about a ruthless woman who resorts to multiple murders in an attempt to retain a suitcase containing $60,000 that does not belong to her.
Jigsaw is pretty scary, but that is so cool. So how much did normal stuff cost compared to now?
A house in 1940 cost around $2,938, but in 2024 it costs around $417,700. A car in 1940 cost around $850, but in 2024 it costs around $45,000, $283. And for milk, in 1940 it cost around 56 cents, but in 2024 it costs around $4.27.
Wow, what a difference throughout the years. What were some of your favorite foods when you came to the U.S.?
Bee cheese gum, Boston baked beans, chewy candy, sugar daddy, and candy buns.
Some of those are my favorite too. Speaking of favorites, what are some popular songs from the 40s?
Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire, Moonlight Cocktail, and Chattanooga Choo Choo, and Paper Doll.
Those are some great songs still. What are some great people from your country?
Christopher Columbus and George Clooney.
Cool. What are some famous people from the 40s?
Veronica Lake, Carol Landis, James Stewart, Cary Grant, and Frank Sinatra.
Those are some pretty famous people. Speaking of famous, what are some sports facts in 1940?
The Philadelphia Warriors won against the Chicago Stags, Philadelphia, coached by Eddie Gottlieb, who had the most extensive pro background of anyone in the BAA, Basketball Association of America. The football teams in 1940 were the Chicago Bears, Washington Redskins, Brooklyn Dodgers, Green Bay Packers, New York Giants, Detroit Lions, Cleveland Rams, Chicago Cardinals, Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Philadelphia Eagles. The head coach for the Chicago Bears was George Halas. The general manager of the Chicago Bears was George Halas, too. The 1940 season was the Chicago Bears' 21st in the National Football League. The team matched on their 8-3 record from 1939 under head coach George Haas. Behind NFL great Sid Luckman, the club gained a berth in the NFL championship.
I didn't even know that the Bears were so good. Speaking of famous, what was an interesting story about you?
When I came to the U.S., I started a lamb farm and created the biggest lamb and veal business in the Chicagoland area. It is called Chipetti Lamb and Veal. Chipetti meats can also be found at Jewel and Mariano's today.
Wow, I should go and try that out. Speaking of Chicago, where did you move it to U.S.?
New York. It is very beautiful, by the way. But then I also moved into Oak Lawn, too. It is beautiful there, too.
Wow, I have always wanted to go to New York, but what were your first jobs, though?
We both worked on a farm.
Dang, it must be stinky there.
You bet it is.
Ha! And that is it for the annual 1940 History Smashers. Yay!
Thank you for having me here.
No problem.